certainly do. Yeah, I felt it with my own mother. My mother always, with her home economics education, emphasis on nutrition. We heard lots of, and she was ahead of time. My kids always say, Grandma was ahead of her time in terms of nutrition. But I think, because my father was successful in his world, he wrote textbooks, and Bobby Loebker?
Yes.
Bobby Loebker actually took a course with my father
Really?
at the University of Kentucky, yes.
Huh.
So I think my mother felt some, some of that feeling. And maybe, again, talking about interactions in your home and the importance of the home environment, maybe I felt that as a child. And maybe, of course, being a girl, I felt, well, I have to be the girl and the boy. I have to be everything for my parents. And as I see this world, my dad seems to have the better deal out of it. Maybe that's, who knows what you think, or when you go back and think it over and memory is not so great, we modify. The memories that we have are undoubtedly modified from reality.
Well, but I think things like that have a difference. I know the thought had crossed my mind. My father died at 40 of a heart attack, and people said that he worked so hard. I had people say he worked himself to death, and that certainly has affected my ambition in terms of how hard I will work and what I feel I need to achieve and so on.
It would definitely.
So,
but then seeing your mother take over, and
well, she was very strong, and she suffered. I mean, it was very hard.
Very, very hard for her.
She was also. You went to college at 16.
Yeah.
She went to college at 16. She originally graduated high school at 15, and Barnard would not accept her.
Yes.
Because she was too young.
Too young.
So she went to Hunter in New York. But Hunter, she said it was like high school. At the time, it was like she said the first class she took, the professor spent all this time telling them about the margins that she wanted on their papers, and then she measured the margins to make sure they weren't, and she just
that
left.
Wasn't for her.
It was not for her. So she waited a year, and she went to Barnard, and she was Phi Beta Kappa. She was Phi Beta Kappa. She math major. She loved it.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Terrific.
And then she went to law school in Boston, to Boston Law School.
Yeah.
And she was one of 7 female law students in the city of Boston.
One of 7 in the city of Boston.
And of course the professors made them feel that, you're taking up a man's seat.
Yes.
And she became editor of Law Review.
Really?
And then she came to New York, and it was very hard to find a job.
She was a woman.
Because women lawyers, very few got jobs, or it was very hard to get a job. And there was one law firm that hired women.
Well, your mother was probably a little older than I.
Yes. She was born in 1915, so she was.
Oh, she was a little older. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was not particularly. I went to Columbia, which had a high percentage of women in medical school, 10%, and that was a high percentage. And I was very glad to have been married when I went to medical school. I think it made it just easier in relation to all those men.
I imagine so. So she, during her last year, she told me this anecdote. She had this. She was working for this law firm in New York, and they kept her pretty much in the back room.
In the back.
Yeah, they didn't send her to court and things like that.
Oh,
she was
really?
a woman, she did research, and that's what she liked. But one time, none of the male lawyers was available. They needed someone to go to the federal court. I think it was federal in downtown Manhattan to present some motions, and it was pouring rain. So she had a raincoat and maybe an umbrella too. I don't know, a hat and the galoshes, everything. And she went down there and walked into the building, dripping wet. She went to the cloakroom, and the attendant said, "I'm sorry, this is for male attorneys only." And of course, there was none for female attorneys. So she had to essentially go into the courtroom with the judge and everything with her dripping belongings to present her motions. And the memory was strong enough that she recounted the story. It must have been 50 years later when she told me.
Oh, hard to believe.
So if I'm a bit of a feminist, you can see where it comes from.
That's interesting. Well, you know, and it's not to be critical, because that was the culture. Culture has to change, and culture is changing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, well, you know, when did women get the vote in the United States? That's so hard for me to believe. That was during my parents.
Women couldn't even own property.
Is that
Not
right?
many years before that. Yeah, married woman, all her property would become her husband's. This was in the 19th century. I don't think it reached into the 20th, but it was. My mother would tell me about these things, and it's hard to believe that. And there are countries in the world where it's like that now. So it's certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, the history of the treatment of women is as bad as anything you can come up with.
As bad as anything you can bring up. Oh, absolutely. Women have always been, well, just lesser.
Well,
Or a different role.
You're more charitable than I am.
Yeah.
Or forgiving or whatever. I mean, when life depends upon physical strength, when that's how you enforce what you want, men have a biological advantage, and they've used it. And thankfully, that seems to be changing in a lot of places in the world. And I think the arc of history is, if we don't destroy the environment first, that women will. And maybe that's what we need, is, that's another reason we need women to take over.
Well, it was funny, we were at Bridge the other day, and I just overheard Larry Cooper.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's really good. He has a wonderful partner, another statistician. They're way up on top all the time. But anyway, I heard him say something about, they were talking politics, I guess. He said, well, I'm going to vote for a woman. The men have done so badly, let's just see what the women can do. Yay.
Well, I'm all for that. However, we had a chance to vote for a woman vice president a number of years ago.
That's right.
I don't think women, being a woman unfortunately isn't enough, I think.
Well, I mean, that isn't enough, of course not. Well, I hope you've gotten the information you need.
Well, I certainly have gotten a fund of information, much more than I can put into any one item, but it will be, I hope, on the web. And
well,
thank you very much again for doing it. Let me turn this thing off before I say anything more that I shouldn't get on tape.
Well, it's fun to see you. It's fun to talk to you.
Well, thank you. It's certainly been a pleasure for me.